Evelyn Hart had never imagined that at 38, she would still be struggling to find stability in her career. Every morning when she walked into the glass building of Reed International, she carried the same mix of hope and fear, hope that today might finally be easier, and fear that her boss, Jonathan Reed, might find a new reason to question her place there. The company was big, the competition was fierce, and Jonathan had a reputation for being demanding, unpredictable, and painfully direct. Still, Evelyn worked hard, harder than most, determined to prove that she deserved her position, but the morning he called her into his office, she sensed something different. Jonathan wasn't the type to play around, and he certainly wasn't the type to waste time. His voice through the intercom was unusually calm, almost too calm. She walked into his office with a careful breath, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the way he didn't immediately look her in the eyes. "Evelyn," he said, finally leaning back in his chair. "I need to see some commitment from you." She froze for a moment, unsure what new standard she was expected to meet this time. She had completed all recent projects, handled extra tasks, worked late hours, and never complained. "Of course," she replied softly. "Just tell me what you need." Jonathan sighed, intertwining his fingers. "I'm considering some restructuring. I want people on my team who are truly dedicated. People who can follow through. If you want to secure your position here, I need you to complete something for me." Her heart tightened. She wasn't expecting this. What kind of task? The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, the expression unreadable. "A personal one," he said. "My son, Caleb, is planning a 10-day walking journey through the mountains. I want you to accompany him. Make sure he stays safe, stays on track, and finishes. If you return after 10 days, I'll keep you. If not, well, we'll talk." For a moment, Evelyn couldn't even respond. She thought she had misheard him. Mountains? A walking journey? 10 days? This was nothing like the responsibilities described in her job contract. She wasn't an assistant, a guide, or a chaperone. She was an analyst. But she also knew Jonathan well enough to understand that no wasn't an option he accepted easily. "I don't understand," she finally said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why me?" "Because I trust you," he replied simply. "And because Caleb could use someone responsible around him. You take care of your work. You follow instructions. You'll be fine." The words didn't comfort her. Still, she felt trapped. Jobs weren't easy to find, and she had responsibilities, rent, bills, her younger sister's support. She couldn't afford a gap in employment. After a long moment of thought, she nodded slowly. "If this is what you need, I'll do it." Jonathan smiled with a sense of satisfaction that made her stomach twist. "Good. He's waiting downstairs. You leave tomorrow morning." When she walked out of his office, her legs felt heavy. She immediately called the one person who would always give her honest advice, Nora, her best friend. They met outside a cafe near her workplace. The moment Evelyn explained everything, Nora's eyebrows rose sharply. "He wants you to go where?" Nora asked in disbelief. "For 10 days? In the mountains? With his son?" Evelyn sighed. "I know how it sounds. It sounds like he's using you because he knows you need the job," Nora said firmly. "This is not normal. This is not work." "But if I don't go," Evelyn leaned back, rubbing her forehead. "I can't risk losing my job, Nora." Her friend softened, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Then be careful. And don't let him use you beyond this. You deserve better." The next morning, Evelyn met Caleb Reed, a young man of 21 with calm eyes and a polite smile. He didn't look anything like his father. Where Jonathan was sharp and intimidating, Caleb was relaxed, almost gentle in his manner. His backpack was already strapped onto his shoulders, and he greeted her with a respectful nod. "You must be Evelyn," he said. "My dad told me you'd be joining me. I hope it's not too much trouble." Trouble wasn't the word she would have chosen, but she forced a smile. "It's all right. I'm ready." They left early, taking a bus to the edge of the mountain range before beginning their trek. The first hours were surprisingly quiet. Birds echoed through the trees, the wind rustled across the leaves, and the trail stretched long and winding in front of them. For a while, they walked side by side without speaking. Eventually, Caleb broke the silence. "I know my dad can be intense," he said with a laugh. "I didn't expect him to send someone with me." Evelyn glanced at him. "Do you know why he did?" Caleb shrugged. "He probably wants proof I can handle responsibility. He thinks I quit things too easily." There was no bitterness in his tone, just honesty. Evelyn found that refreshing. "And can you?" she asked. "I guess we'll find out," he replied with a small smile. By the end of the first day, she was exhausted. The trail had been steeper than she expected, and her legs felt like they were carrying twice their weight. Still, Caleb remained patient, slowing his pace when she needed a break, offering water, sharing quiet stories about his college life. There was no arrogance in him, no hint of the sharpness she knew in his father. As the second and third days passed, they settled into a rhythm, walking in the mornings, resting at noon, reaching a small resting area or campsite by evening. The mountains were breathtaking, long ridges of green stretching into the horizon, rivers threading between rocks, birds soaring in the sky like moving dots. And somewhere within all of that, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Though they talked, shared small moments, and supported each other through the tiring stretches, a careful distance remained. She reminded herself constantly that she was here because of her job, because she needed stability, not because she wanted connection. Still, she couldn't deny that Caleb's presence made the journey less intimidating, less lonely. By the seventh day, as they reached a narrow trail overlooking the valley, Evelyn felt the weight of everything pressing on her at once: the journey, the pressure from Jonathan, the strange challenge she never asked for. Something in her began to shift, not toward Caleb, but toward her own understanding that she had been running on fear for far too long, and somewhere along that path, she realized, she wasn't sure she wanted to return to the same version of herself she had been before the journey began. By the morning of the 8th day, Evelyn could feel each step settle deep into her muscles, but something inside her felt strangely lighter. Maybe it was the days spent away from the city, the clean air, or the quiet company of someone who didn't expect perfection from her. Or maybe it was the realization that she had not thought about Jonathan's constant criticism for almost a week. Out there, on the endless trails, she had space to breathe, to think, to simply exist without being evaluated every second, but she also felt the growing conflict she had tried so hard to ignore. She hadn't expected to feel this close to Caleb, not in a romantic way, but in a way that made her uncomfortable because it was easy to trust him, easy to talk to him, easier than it should have been. And that felt like stepping into dangerous territory, the kind that could blur lines, twist emotions, and leave her questioning her own intentions. Caleb noticed the quiet heaviness in her eyes as they walked along a narrow trail lined with tall pines. "You've been deep in thought since morning," he said gently. "Is everything okay?" She hesitated. "Just thinking about work. About your father." He let out a small sigh that carried more emotion than he usually showed. "I figured as much. My dad, he's strict. Controlling, even with me. I'm not surprised he put you in a difficult position." Evelyn smiled sadly. This whole journey has been unexpected. Unexpected good or unexpected bad? He asked. She took a moment to answer. Both. They walked a little further, the gravel crunching softly beneath their boots. The sun filtered through the trees in soft golden lines, and for a moment, Evelyn wished they could stay in that simplicity forever, two people walking through nature without expectations, without roles, without pressure. As they reached a steep incline, she paused to catch her breath. Caleb stopped beside her. "Do you want to rest?" "No," she said quickly. "I'm fine. Just tired." "You don't have to pretend with me," he said, his voice sincere. "You've pushed yourself enough." She looked at him, seeing an earnestness she wasn't used to. People in her life often needed something from her, her time, her labor, her compliance. But Caleb's concern came with no demand attached. It felt unfamiliar, and that unfamiliarity was exactly what made her uneasy. They found a shaded rock to sit on. The valley below stretched endlessly, dotted with patches of sunlight and winding trails they had walked days earlier. Evelyn rested her backpack on the ground and leaned her head back. Caleb sat beside her, elbows resting on his knees. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you stay in that job? You're smart. You're capable. You don't seem like the type who'd let someone walk all over you." His words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. She turned her gaze toward the distant hills. "Life doesn't always give us the choices we want. I have responsibilities. Bills. Family. Starting over isn't easy." "I get that," he said softly. "But sometimes staying costs more than leaving." She didn't reply. She didn't trust herself to. Her throat tightened with thoughts she had buried for years, dreams she had sacrificed, opportunities she let slip because she believed stability mattered more than happiness. And now here she was, walking through mountains with a young man who saw through her defenses more clearly than people she had known for decades. It made her feel exposed. Seen. And that was dangerous. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered overhead. The air grew cold, and the wind picked up, carrying the sharp scent of rain. Caleb glanced upward. "We should find shelter. Looks like a storm's coming." They found a partially covered rocky overhang just as the first drops began to fall. The rain came quickly, turning into a harsh downpour that echoed through the open space. They set their backpacks down, shaking off the water. Evelyn rubbed her hands together for warmth. Caleb crouched near the entrance, watching the rain crash against the ground. "I hope it clears soon," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Maybe we'll have to wait it out," she replied. The storm grew loud, almost violent. Inside the shelter, the world felt small, enclosed, as if time had slowed enough to force them to confront thoughts they had both avoided. Caleb finally turned to her, his expression softer. "Evelyn, can I be honest?" She nodded. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "Not because my dad asked you to. But because, it's been a long time since I talked to someone who listens like you do." Her breath caught slightly. "Caleb, I know," he said immediately, raising a hand as if stopping himself. "I'm not saying anything inappropriate. I respect you. But you've been kinder to me in 7 days than my own father has been in years. And that matters." His sincerity tugged at something inside her, something she didn't want to acknowledge. She wasn't falling for him, that wasn't the danger. The danger was the possibility of relying on him emotionally, letting him fill the gaps left by stress, exhaustion, loneliness. That kind of emotional closeness was its own form of betrayal, not against a partner, but against her own boundaries. She looked away, swallowing the tightness in her chest. "You've been kind to me too," she said softly. "More than you know." But we have to be careful. Lines exist for a reason. I know, he said, leaning back against the stone wall. And I'm not trying to cross anything. I just care. That's all. For a long moment, they sat in silence while the storm raged outside. The space between them felt charged, not with desire, but with unspoken truths. Two people who weren't supposed to understand each other, yet somehow did. Finally, Evelyn took a deep breath. We're heading back tomorrow. Caleb looked over, surprised. We're not finishing the 10 days. No, she said firmly. I'm done being manipulated. Your father sent me here for reasons that had nothing to do with you. I'm not going to let him decide my worth anymore. He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. If that's what you want, I'm with you. Are you sure? She asked. Absolutely. Outside, the rain softened. The storm was passing. And so, it seemed, was the version of herself she had been avoiding letting go of. The next morning, Ethan woke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the curtains. He stretched and yawned, feeling both rested and slightly anxious about what the day might bring. Vanessa had already started preparing breakfast when he stepped into the kitchen. The smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee filled the room, making the space feel even warmer and more inviting. Good morning, Ethan, Vanessa said with a smile, her voice calm and comforting. Sleep well? Yes, thank you, he replied, returning her smile, a little shyly. He noticed the gentle way she moved around the kitchen, the ease with which she handled the pans and dishes, and couldn't help but admire her grace. Vanessa caught his gaze and looked away quickly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, as though she, too, felt the subtle electricity that lingered between them. Breakfast was a quiet, comfortable affair. They shared stories of their childhoods, their hobbies, and their dreams. Ethan laughed more freely than he had the day before, encouraged by Vanessa's easy warmth. Vanessa, in turn, found herself fascinated by his curiosity, the way he noticed small details, and the earnest way he asked questions. Each passing moment seemed to draw them closer, their conversations weaving a delicate thread of connection. After breakfast, Vanessa suggested showing Ethan the town. There are a few places you might like to see, she said. The park, the library, and the little market down the street. Ethan agreed eagerly, and they set out together. The walk was leisurely, giving them the chance to talk and share quiet smiles. Sometimes their hands brushed against each other by accident, sending small shocks of awareness through them both. Each touch lingered just a moment too long, yet neither said anything. At the park, Ethan watched Vanessa interact with people they passed, neighbors, shopkeepers, and even a few children. Her kindness and confidence impressed him, and he felt a mixture of admiration and a strange, unfamiliar longing. Vanessa noticed his gaze and felt her own pulse quicken slightly, aware of the subtle attraction growing between them. She told herself it was nothing, just the natural warmth of companionship, yet she couldn't ignore the way her thoughts lingered on him after each shared smile or word. In the late afternoon, rain began to fall softly, sending them both running for shelter under the awning of a small cafe. Inside, they ordered hot drinks and found a quiet corner, the cozy atmosphere amplifying the closeness they already felt. The sound of rain tapping against the windows created a rhythmic backdrop, almost like a heartbeat that matched the tension in the room. They sat side by side, their knees occasionally brushing, a warmth spreading through them that neither fully understood. Vanessa suggested they play a board game she kept on a nearby shelf, just to pass the time. Ethan agreed, and as they played, their laughter filled the room. Occasionally, Vanessa would reach across the board to move a piece, their hands briefly touching. Each touch sent a small jolt of awareness through both of them, and the room seemed charged with a quiet energy. Ethan's eyes met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. He wanted to say something, anything, to acknowledge the feeling, but words failed him. Vanessa felt the same hesitation, caught between restraint and desire. As the rain slowed, they returned home, dripping slightly from the remaining drops. Vanessa suggested drying off with warm towels, and the simple act of helping each other brought a new closeness. Ethan's hand brushed Vanessa's as she handed him a towel, and they both lingered just a second too long, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The small gestures, the shared smiles, and the easy comfort of one another's presence had woven a tension that neither could deny. Evening came, and they found themselves in the living room once more, sitting near the fireplace. The flames flickered, casting shadows on the walls, and the warmth of the fire seemed to echo the warmth growing between them. Vanessa offered Ethan a blanket, draping it over his shoulders, and their fingers brushed as she adjusted it. Both of them felt the jolt of electricity, a mix of curiosity and desire that neither wanted to name out loud. Vanessa suggested a quiet moment, just sitting together, listening to music, letting the day's conversation settle. Ethan leaned back, feeling the comfort of her presence, and Vanessa felt a protective warmth toward him that was complicated by a new, unexpected attraction. They sat in silence, yet it was a silence filled with unspoken words, glances, and gentle movements that deepened the emotional intimacy. As the night deepened, Vanessa showed Ethan to his room again. He paused at the doorway, looking back at her with a mixture of admiration and something unspoken. "Good night, Vanessa," he said softly. "Good night, Ethan," she replied, her voice carrying the faint tremor of emotions she tried to hide. Alone, both of them reflected on the day, the laughter, the closeness, and the subtle touches that lingered in their memories. The attraction was undeniable, yet wrapped in the comfort of trust and care, creating a tension that neither wanted to confront too soon. The room was quiet, but both hearts were full of thoughts and feelings that promised a night of emotional awakening yet to come.